So welcome once again to the question paper analysis of UGC NET English, December 2021, Shift 1, presented by Professor Academy, Chennai. And today we are going to discuss questions from 11 to 15. And let's go to question number 11. Who among the following represents the global spread of English diagrammatically as three concentric circles? Option A, Braj B. Kajru, B. David Crystal, C. Jenny Cheshire, D. Salikoko Muffin. Right. So we have options here. So what you have to find out. So who was that linguist who was known for representing the spread of English, across the world as three concentric circles? So that's the question. And let's go to the answer. A. Braj B. Kajru, B-R-A-J, B, then Kajru, K-A-C-H-R-U. So Braj Kajru was an Indian linguist. He was known for coining this phrase called World English. Even that could be a question in the upcoming exams or later exams. Who coined the phrase World English? It was coined by the Indian linguist Braj Kajru, who is working in a university in the US. And he was known for this book, World English's Critical Concepts in Linguistics, edited by Braj Kajru with Kingsley Bolton. Then his another famous book, The Alchemy of English, The Spread, Functions and Models of Non-Native Englishes. And we have to pay attention to the word Englishes, it is in the plural. So Braj Kajru talks about Indian English or Pakistani English or Asian English. He talks about non-native Englishes. So that's why, as a linguist, he enjoys a status, an admirable, enviable status. So this book, you should remember, The Alchemy of English, The Spread, Functions and Models of Non-Native Englishes. So generally linguists, they focus on British English, American, Australian or Canadian, but this is of a different kind. And focus is more on the Asian Englishes. And this is his contribution. He came up with a diagram representing the English speaking world, a kind of three concentric circles, right? Inner circle, outer circle, and the expanding circle. Now let's look at what does it mean? These circles mean. Let's see. Three concentric circles. Number one, inner circle. So in these countries, English is used as a first language. Of course, we have Britain, where the language originated. Then we have Ireland, the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. In these countries, English is used as a first language. And we go to the next circle, outer circle, where English is used as a second or a major language, like India. So we have India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Singapore, Malaysia, Malawi, Nigeria, where English is a second or major language. Then we have the last circle, expanding circle, right? The name is self-explanatory. It is expanding, where English is used as a foreign language, especially for certain purposes, for teaching or commercial, for commerce or technical language, for science. So this is the expanding circle. We have countries like China, Japan, Sweden, Israel, Greece, the Czech Republic, and so on and on. So this is his contribution to understand the growth and the spread of English across the world. So three concentric circles. Later point of time, this could be a question. What are the name of the three concentric circles put forward by the Indian linguist Braj Kajru? So inner, outer, and expanding. And you should know the difference between these three. And next, let's go back to the option. And not all the option, but this option is important. Question number 11, option B, David Crystal. Whenever we think of linguists across the world, this gentleman is considered a kind of revolutionary, as a kind of a legend, a living legend. We have David Crystal, and he has written a lot of books, and this book is often used. The Cambridge Encyclopedia of Language by Crystal. You can find almost anything you want to know about language in general. And this linguist is so liberal, he has this open mind where he talks about all types of language. And this book, just look at this book, texting. He has also done research on texting, the language people use for texting. And look at the title, texting, how it's spelled, TXTNG, texting. And the subtitle, The Great Debate. And it's also used in such a way, see, the GR8 and DB8. So the Great Debate. So that's how, so he keeps pace with the growth of English. And he is the one person, if you want to learn everything about the English language and its growth and spread and everything, right? And we'll go to the next one. And this is the series I find very fascinating because I'm a great fan of David Crystal, and I read the middle book. This is actually a series. So he has been writing the history of the English language, especially focusing on a particular topic. The first book is on spelling, English spelling. So title, Spell It Out. Subtitle of that book, The Singular Story of English Spelling. So it not only talks about the growth of English spelling, it's a kind of a history of the English spelling, the spelling reformations and American English and everything comes here. Next book is very fascinating because I like punctuation so much. I bought this book and it's really interesting. It appeals to me. It may also appeal to you. Making a Point, the pernickety story of English punctuation. It not just gives you, the functions of each and every punctuation like comma or semicolon. It also talks about how it came into being. Now, punctuation came into being and its growth. And the next book, Making Sense, the glamorous story of English grammar. So whenever there is, you can expect a question from linguistics, and you should know something about David Crystal. His contribution to this field is enormous. It's and he's peerless. There is no one you can say who has contributed so much to the growth of linguistics in modern times. Now let's go to question number 12. Which of these UK universities saw the first institutional incorporation of cultural studies? So we have a separate section, in our syllabus prescribed to UGC Net English, there is a separate portion, simply put, cultural studies. That's just 2 words. So definitely there will be questions, at least 3 or 4 questions from this topic every year. So we have to pay attention to cultural studies if you are going to start your preparation now. So option A, Bath Spa University, B, Cambridge University, C, Oxford University, D, University of Birmingham. So where, what was the starting point for cultural studies? Which university? So that's the question. We'll go to the answer. D, University of Birmingham. And the moment you read about cultural studies, this is the first thing you look at, you come across. So I won't say this is a tough question if you have read something about cultural studies and the origin of cultural studies. When you talk about cultural studies, the first thing you come across is actually University of Birmingham. So cultural studies as a field came into being because of a group of scholars, especially Richard Hoggart. So Richard Hoggart was known for establishing a Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, CCCS. So that's the short form, Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. It was actually a research center, PG research center, founded in 1964, where the question is from this part, at the University of Birmingham. So if you have read something about cultural studies and the origin of cultural studies, this might be a very easy question because it's very direct. So next time you can expect the name of Richard Hoggart or the members of, the founding members of this institution, right? And what is cultural studies? And generally, the critics, they draw their thoughts from Marxism. And what is the job of cultural studies? What they analyze? They critically analyze the cultural forms in contemporary societies. Whenever you, learn about a topic, make sure that you have examples. This definition might look simple, but it doesn't make sense unless we have certain solid examples. What is this cultural forms? Cultural forms can be of anything, right? It can be the clothes we wear, the food we eat, or the language we use on the train or our transportation or any particular specific festival or anything that represents that particular culture. So when we think of Tamil culture or Indian culture is vast, is diverse, or Malayali culture or Bengali culture. So if you say culture, culture is ordinary, right? When you say culture is ordinary, it's all about what we eat, what we wear, or what we talk, or where we go, or our religious beliefs or superstitions. Everything come into being, come into this part. So these are the cultural forms. So they talk about television or television programs, movies, cartoons. They talk about all kind of things that represent a particular culture. So that is cultural studies. You can bring anything under this, or you can talk about anything under this topic, right? And this is the origin. And who were the other prominent members of this center? So when we say cultural studies, we have key figures. Like first, you have to talk about Richard Hogarth. When we say Richard Hogarth, you have to start with this book, The Uses of Literacy, Aspects of Working Class Life. So when you read this book, at least initial chapters, you will know what cultural studies is about. So now his focus is more on literacy. So you talk about how literacy is a kind of a cultural phenomena. So he talks about that. The uses of literacy, subtitle, aspects of working class life. So whenever you analyze a previous year question paper or past question papers, you also have to go for, you also have to go for options and other points on that. So this would be one thing. So now next time they might ask, which cultural critic is known for, this book called, wrote this book called the Uses of Literacy. The other critics, we have Raymond Williams, a kind of a giant in this field. Then we have E.P. Thompson. Then Stuart Hall is again a prominent member. Then we have Dick Hebdige, Hebdige. Then we have already looked at Pierre Bourdieu. You might remember this. Go back to the part 1 of this discussion, question paper discussion, I think, where we discussed Pierre Bourdieu, French critic, and for his concept habitus. So you can go back and look at it, look at that video. Then we have Angela McRobbie. I was thrilled to read Angela McRobbie's essay, Postmodernism and Popular Culture. So if you are interested, read this essay. It's very fascinating, and you will know, oh, this is cultural studies. If you want an introduction or kind of an initiation into cultural studies, you can read, which is approachable, readable, very easy to read essay by Angela McRobbie, Postmodernism and Popular Culture. And this text was introduced to me by my friend Uma. And the moment she gave, she suggested this text, I thought, okay, that's something, and I read. It's interesting and easy to read. You can start with this essay. So if you are introducing, or if you are going to acquaint yourself with cultural studies. Now, what you have to do? So now you have to start collecting points about cultural studies. So that is the brief introduction to the origin or the starting point of cultural studies. What you have to do next? Why don't you check out the works written by some of the prominent members, like Angela McRobbie or Raymond Williams. When we say Raymond Williams, we have this work, Culture and Society. Then we have E.P. Thompson. See, you can see the trace of Marxism here, focusing on working class here. So E.P. Thompson, The Making of the English Working Class. Then we have a collection, one of its editors, Stuart Hall, Policing the Crisis, Mugging the State and Law and Order. Right? It talks about mugging, people who steal something from you at a knife point, or kind of threatening you, right, called a mugging. So it talks about that cultural phenomena, right? So this is the essence of cultural studies. For instance, these days students do research on cultural studies. For instance, there are students who looked at food literature, right? And when they go for food literature, one of the students worked only on biryani, right? Biryani, and how it is represented in literature or in real life. So that can be considered a dissertation based on cultural studies. So you can talk about toys, or you can talk about cricket You can talk about anything that represents a particular culture. So that can be considered topics under cultural studies. Now, the journal. For this studies, that center is called New Left Review. You can easily remember since cultural critics, they have some leanings on Marxism, and the title is New Left Review. So we can see the influence of Marxism on the critics as well as the title, New Left Review. So this could be the next question for you. What is the journal for that center in Birmingham University, CCS? Right? And it was established, the journal was established in 1960, and its first editor-in-chief, Stuart Hall. So these are the basic things about cultural studies. Next, what we have to do, we have to check out the famous essays written by these critics, and we have to know something about the essays, so that next time they will go deep and we can easily answer, at least eliminate options and go for 50-50. Now, let's go for the 13th question. Who among the following edited the Cornhill Magazine? Option A, Anthony Trollope, B, Charles Dickens, C, Lewis Carroll, D, William Makepeace Thackeray. So definitely you can expect a question from journals. Most of the time they ask a question from journals, magazines, newspapers. And this is particularly from Victorian age. And let's go to the answer. Answer D, William Makepeace Thackeray. So what has he to do with this magazine? So he was the first editor of this magazine. The magazine was founded by George Murray Smith in 1860, and it ran up to 1975. Its first editor was William Makepeace Thackeray. And another famous editor, Leslie Stephen. You might have heard of Leslie Stephen, who was a biographer, and he also came up with a national biography, was also the father of Virginia Woolf. So that was actually once a question in a set exam. So who was the father of Virginia Woolf? So this was the answer. And whenever you read about magazines or journals, you can't remember everything. So what you have to do, you have to associate a magazine with one of the works they published, published in that magazine or in magazines. For instance, George Eliot's Romola, R-O-M-O-L-A, a historical novel set in the 15th century Italy, Florence. And this novel was serialized in the Cornhill magazine, because those days, especially during the Victorian age, the novels were serialized. It's a kind of soap operas now, right? So what you have to do, whenever you read about a magazine, make sure you also read about at least one or two famous works published by those magazines. So hereafter, when you think of the Cornhill magazine, think of George Eliot's Romola and its first editor, William Makepeace Thackeray and Leslie Stephen. So this is how you can remember the name of the magazine. And Victorian age, we also have another famous periodical by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens founded two periodicals or magazines. One, Household Words, from 1850 to 59. So as I told you before, if you want to remember this, so why don't you remember the famous works published or serialized in this magazine? So we have the Victorian writer, Elizabeth Gaskell. Her novel Cranford was serialized in Dickens' Household Words, and Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South, again serialized in Household Words. So when we think of Elizabeth Gaskell was known for her industrial novels. She talked about the industrial setup during the Victorian age. So think of Household Words, think of Elizabeth Gaskell and her industrial novels like Cranford and North and South. And there is another work also published in, there are a lot of works, but I'm just giving you some examples. We have Wilkie Collins, W-I-L-K-I-E, Wilkie Collins play, The Frozen Deep. Why this is important? Because Wilkie Collins and Dickens were close friends. And Wilkie Collins wrote this work in collaboration with Dickens. Even this could be a question. What was the name of the play written by Dickens along with in collaboration with Wilkie Collins? So this is the answer, and this was serialized in Household Words, The Frozen Deep. Sometimes this is how they ask questions. So you have to know something about the author, and so so think in a reverse way. Whenever you read about a poet, make sure whether the poet has written a novel, so or a play, because we think of a poet as a poet, but the question setters go for the novel written by the poet or the play written by the poet. Similar way, we think Dickens as a novelist, but he has also written short stories and drama. So questions will come from this area. This is how the question setters think, and you should also change the perspective and read about the other aspects or facets of a given author. The next periodical, we have All the Year Round from 1859 to 1870. Very important periodical by Dickens, because in this periodical we got A Tale of Two Cities. It was serialized in this work 1859. Very important year, 1859. When we think of 1859, we can also think of Darwin on the Origin of Species. That was also published in 1859. Sometimes we have to remember years. So this is how you can connect and remember years. A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, and we have Darwin. So Dickens and Darwin. You can remember 1859. And we know the heroes and heroines or heroine of this work, A Tale of Two Cities. We have Lucy Manet, and we have Sidney Carton and Charles Darnay. So whenever you come across a classic text, read about the story, read about the plot or ending. Of course, the beginning. It was the best of times and the worst of times. And also check out the last sentence or the famous lines of the ending of this book. People always talk about the opening. Equally important, the last lines of A Tale of Two Cities. Also find out the major characters. We have Sidney Carton, one of the major characters. Then we come to Charles Dickens, another famous work, Great Expectations, which I consider his best book. I also love this book so much. Great Expectations, you can think of the hero protagonist Philip Pirrip, or you have this Miss Havisham, the Satis House, and we have this benefactor of Pip, Abel Mackwitch, or the heroine Stella. So think of all these things, and you should also know Charles Dickens actually wrote a different ending for this novel, a kind of not a happy ending. So one of his friends read that ending, and he asked Dickens to change the ending. Kind of a happy ending where Pip and Stella, it's implied that they are going to be united in life. So that is the next ending. He revised the ending for publication. So what you can do, why don't you find out the name of the friend who suggested that revision to Charles Dickens after reading the manuscript? So that's how they ask questions. Then we know Wilkie Collins. Wilkie Collins, was a great friend of Charles Dickens, and one of his famous work, the detective novel, The Moonstone. It was also serialized in this magazine all the year round. So hereafter, whenever you read about a periodical or novel, a magazine, make sure that you remember, you associate the magazine with one of the publications, right? So we'll go to the next one. Question number 14. Charles Lamb used the pseudonym Elia for writing in which of the following periodicals? Option A, Athenaeum, B, London Magazine, C, the Edinburgh Review, D, the Quarterly Review. If you are aware of Charles Dickens and his essays and the pseudonym, then this might be an easy question. B, London Magazine. Why London Magazine? He used this pseudonym, kind of a pen name. He wrote a lot of essays, and later he collected all the essays, published essays, and printed as a book, as a volume. And of course, as you know, in his essays, he used this pseudonym Elia for himself, and for his sister, he represents his sister as cousin Bridget. And one of the famous essays, Dream Children, a reverie, and in which we have two children, a kind of, because Charles Lamb didn't get married. He was a bachelor forever. He took care of his sister, who was actually disturbed bit uh, bit mentally. So he took care of her sister. But anyway, their contribution to literature, again, we have in 1807, Charles Lamb and Mary Lamb, they came up with this collection, beautiful collection, Tales from Shakespeare. It's a kind of a retelling in simple language for children. Anyone can read. It's a beautiful work to read. Tales from Shakespeare. Next, in his essays, his brother John Lamb was represented as or portrayed as John L. or James Elia. So these could be possible questions. Next time they might ask, John L. represents Charles Lamb's brother, sister, something else, or uncle or father. That could be a question. Then Charles Lamb didn't get married, but he was in love with Anne Simmons. But Anne Simmons married someone else. So Anne Simmons is represented as Alice in Charles Lamb's essay. Even Charles Lamb wrote a collection of poems, a work for Anne Simmons, Rosamund Grey. You can check this work, which reveals his love for Anne Simmons. Next, we have his father John Lamb. Both brother and father name is the same. Brother John Lamb and also father John Lamb. So John Lamb, the father, is represented as Lowell, L-O-V-E-L, especially in this essay, the old benchers of the inner temple. Next, Aunt Sarah, his father's sister, is represented as Hetty, Aunt Hetty, H-E-T-T-Y, especially in this essay, My Relations. So what you have to do, at least try to read the old benchers of the inner temple, My Relations, or the earlier one, The Dream Children, so that you have some familiarity with Charles Lamb. So at least you can eliminate options, or sometimes you will directly get the answer right. Now let's come to discuss the last question of today's class. 15. Which of these questions would cultural studies be most interested in asking? So again, related to cultural studies, we have already have some introduction to cultural studies. Now we have certain questions. So first, we have 4 statements. We have capital A, who decides what is to be produced? Capital B, who can afford the artifact? C, how is the artifact marketed? D, what is the register of speech in the artifact? Now, let's go for the options. Option A, B, and D only. Option B, A, B, and C only. Option C, A, C, and D only. Option D, B, C, and D only. I would say sometimes, you need not be familiar with a certain field. Just read. We have 4 statements. Find the odd one out, because we have 4, and look at the options. We have 3. So if you can eliminate one that looks strange, then you can easily find out the answer. Let's read the statements again. Who decides what is to be produced? So it has something to do with something that is produced, maybe an artifact or any product for that matter. It an art or any artifact, right? Then who can afford? Again, that is connected. So someone is producing or someone who is going to buy, and how it is marketed. Both, all the 3 are connected, right? So production, then buying, then marketing, all are connected. And what is the last one? What is the register of speech in the artifact? It sounds strange. What has to, register of speech, if you have some understanding of this register of speech in linguistics, then this is an odd one out. It has nothing to do with what is there in the top 3 statements. Then you can easily find out the answer. Answer is actually B, A, B, and C only. Because sometimes, they said questions, but if you pay some attention, you can find the odd one out, and you can easily get the question right. So this is again something to do with the cultural studies. Now let's also analyze what is the register of speech. this term is used in linguistics, especially sociolinguistics. What is sociolinguistics? A linguist, it's a study of the relationship between language and society. So how we use language in everyday society, right? For instance, register refers to choosing your language to suit your audience. Simply put, we vary our language according to the audience and situation. The way we speak to our parents or to our brothers or to a girlfriend or a boyfriend or to a teacher, it varies. Why? Because we know. So if you are speaking to your superior, you go for a formal register. So register refers to the language appropriate to that person, and it shows your relationship with that person and also the situation. So if you are speaking to your family or friends, then you go for an informal register, right? Very casual language. And if you are speaking with your peers, your fellow workers, and if you are in the field of engineering or science or literature, we use certain words and we can understand. We can't elaborate everything. So I can't keep elaborating what is a simile, metaphor, or synecdoche. For others, these are jargon, right? Whether it is synecdoche or metonymy. But for students of literature, we know these figures of speech which we can relate with. So this is jargon. Jargon is a specialized language among specialists. So this is called register. And now let's go back. If you know this is a very easy question. A register of speech has nothing to do with artifact. So this could be a direct question, right? So you have to study in a kind of I would say kind of inter-genre approach. So whenever you read, you have to read parallelly. So whenever you start preparing for NET exam, so every day you have to read something about poetry, something about novels, something about short stories, something about theory and linguistics. So that is some people do make this mistake. They read only history of English literature book. That won't work. Or if you focus only on theory, that won't work. So you should be a kind of an all-rounder. You have to read all the fields in literature. And for cultural studies, if you are interested, you can start with Introducing Cultural Studies, the book by Ziauddin Zardar and illustration by Borin van Loon. So I got my introduction to cultural studies through this book. It is a pictorial. There are a lot of pictures and it's easy to read. Introducing Cultural Studies. Next one is a kind of by an expert called Arthur Asa Berger, Cultural Criticism, a primer of key terms. So it gives a kind of a history and major authors, key figures and their works and other concepts. Or if you think you need a dictionary to look up these terms, you can go for the Sage Dictionary of Cultural Studies by Chris Parker. Okay. So with this, we end today's discussion. So see you tomorrow with another 5 questions. And thank you so much. And you can also follow this in the YouTube, and you can also contact this number if you want to join the course. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.